vamos a ver. Entonces ya sirve el teléfono, ¿verdad? Porque creo que tenías problemas con eso. Sí. Ok. No, pues desde ese día, no te he llamado. Oh, ok. Es que no sabía. Pero sí supe que tenías problemas con eso. Ok. We're live. Good morning and happy. Bueno, yeah, it's already noon. Good afternoon and happy Sabbath. My name is Salvador Gomez. For those of you that will be watching on Facebook or YouTube at a later time, we will go ahead and begin our studies on, um, in this occasion, we plan to study the sealing message. And let me just look for those slides. I don't see it. First angel, third angel. Oh, that's the one. Yeah. Here we go. And our subject for today will be the sealing of the 144,000. If you recall, we studied 2 Sabbaths ago. We studied the history of the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 7, the proclamation of the sealing message. We looked at the history, we looked at how uh, the testimony of Jesus through Ellen G. White received a vision about this proclamation, the sealing message. And now we are going to look at the some of the aspects of the sealing of the 144,000. Now notice we have our first quote coming from J.N. Lofbro, questions on the sealing message. And the question that is asked, when did the sealing work begin? Now this is important, right? This is important because we need to know when it began. When did God begin to seal the 144,000? When did this work of sealing begin? Notice what he says. The testimonies already quoted as to the reception of the sealing message by the Seventh day Adventist is also good proof as to the time when the sealing began. And so, those quotes that we read that Sabbath is good proof as to when it began. And so, we notice that in November 18th, 1848, by this time, when they began to receive visions um, through Ellen G. White about this very message, is when that sealing began. Does that make sense? It's very simple and plain. So from that time forward, we should expect people to begin to be sealed under this message. It continues to say, the four winds of war were about to blow when that commotion among the nations of Europe broke out. And we specifically saw in that presentation about 2 Sabbaths ago that it was in France when that revolution took place in February 1848. Now, notice what it continues to say. The four angels had their commission to hold those winds of war, that the work of sealing be not hindered. A check was put on. Okay, so this check was them holding those winds because they were about to let go, right? So that the sealing might advance. Because God needed to have a special number of uh, persons that were to be sealed, right? And how much is that number? The Bible clearly states it's 144,000 that were to be sealed. As to it being literal or not, that we will get into at a different time, but we know that it's a number that forms this group, and that number is 144,000. As we continue, it says, we will note other testimonies showing that the sealing work was going on at that time. And so we're not going to exhaust those quotes here because we would be here for quite a length of time. And so notice that this quote, among others, that say the very same thing, or at least give us the same thought. Okay, so notice what the quote says, but there's more than one. And so I would challenge anyone to go ahead and search for those quotes that say, uh, I would say, almost the same exact verbiage is being used. It says, in experience, I'll read it again just in case I left anything out. We will note other testimonies showing that the sealing work was going on at that time. What time is this? This is um, beginning in November 18th, 1848. At that time and onward, she uses this language. In Experience and Views, Early Writings, Old Edition, page 35, speaking of what was then occurring, we read, Satan is now, when? Now, using every device in this sealing time to keep the minds of God's people from the present truth and cause them to waver. I saw a covering that God was drawing over his people to protect them in the time of trouble. And so notice that there's going to be a time of trouble where God's people are going to need what? A covering. They need to be covered and protected, right? So during that time, um, we expect conflicts to be going on, wars, uh, the plagues, and therefore God's people need to be covered from it, right? Protected from it. Um, this can't be during a time that there is not much conflict going on or even plagues. And so we need to notice this time of trouble right here. There is a lot of, or let's just put it this way, the angels have let loose of the four winds at this time, right? Because there needed to be what? Protected. They need to be covered. Does that make sense? Notice, and every soul that was decided on the truth and was pure in heart. So notice the qualifications here is they need to be decided on the truth. You need to be decided, and you need to be pure of heart. In other words, the message has done its work in your life. You have accepted that message, the third angel's message, and this has purified your life um, by actually living that message. It says, and was pure in heart, was to be covered with the covering of the Almighty. Okay? And so, again, the reference being made that there was going to be this covering so that during that time when the angels let loose, they would have protection. Okay? But at the very beginning of the quote, we emphasize, as you can see it here on the screen, that Satan is when? Now, using every device in this sealing time. Okay, this sealing time. Um, this quote right here, found in early writings and also Experience and Views, was well after that time in November 1848. It was a few years after, in the 50s. By this time, she had written this quote. Okay, so in the 50s, what is taking place? That sealing time. That sealing time. Okay, not that far from 1848, correct? So we have this, on top of this, a number of quotes that say similar things now in this sealing time. Okay?
And it's still going on now, right?
Definitely. But the question was, when did it begin? The question, let's go back just to know, when did that sealing work begin? Again, November, when they received the message, the proclamation of the sealing. November 18th, 1848. Okay? 1848. And so from that time, of course, until now, because those winds have not let loose, right? So that means that um, logically, we should reason that because those winds have not been let loose, God is still making up the number. God is still sealing people. Okay? Now, let's go to another question. Will any who have died in the faith since, notice the year, 1848, when that message was received, be reckoned or be with the 144,000? Let's see what the quote says. Some persons, now notice this. When did this change take place? It says some persons, more especially since 1894. How many years have passed since 1848?
50.
About 50 years, right? So about 50 years later, 1994, 1894 have claimed that none will be reckoned among the 144,000 but those who lived until the second coming of Christ. And this is what the majority of the mainstream uh, Adventists believe today. Okay, this is what has been spread about in the churches of today. That the only way you can be a part of the 144,000 is if you live all the way till Christ comes. This is what was called the new light, right? Okay, but it's contrary. We're going to see why. It's contrary to what our pioneers believe. Notice what he continues to say. Have claimed that none will be reckoned with among the 144,000 but those who lived until the second coming of Christ. And that this must be so, for according to Revelation 14:3 and 4, they are redeemed from among men and from the earth. Okay? So, to be redeemed from the earth and be redeemed among men, this means that you have to be alive when Christ comes. Those that are a part of the general resurrection are redeemed from where? From the grave. They are taken up out of the grave, right? And brought back to life. Not the 144,000. They will have a special resurrection and live among men and be redeemed while they are living among them or among the living, right? That's what that verse is saying. And this is why they have come to the conclusion that the only way this is going to happen is if you're alive, right? If you're living at the time when Christ comes. So far, are we on the same page? Yeah? Notice the reasons why this is not so. Okay? Let's see what our pioneers have to say about it. They have a voice in this controversy. Okay. Where I leave off? They're redeemed from among men and from the earth. According to Daniel 12, notice what he says here. According to Daniel 12, there is a partial resurrection or a special resurrection. Partial meaning that it's apart, right? Is apart from the general resurrection. A partial resurrection in the time of trouble. And this time of trouble is during the time when the winds have let loose. Okay? Just before Christ's second coming. We read, at that time shall Michael stand up. And that's when the plagues begin to fall. That is when the angels let the winds go. Okay? At that time shall Michael stand up, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall what? Shall awake. Some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And so not only are the um, 144,000, or some of the 144,000 will be resurrected, because these are the ones that resurrect to everlasting life, right? And there will also be a group of people that are condemned at this resurrection. Okay? We'll get into the distinction at a later time. We're not going to discuss that now. Okay? That's just want to show that there will be two types in this resurrection. In the general resurrection, there's going to be one class.
Only one class?
There's going to be one class.
Why?
Because at the general resurrection, it is just for those that have accepted Christ, those that have accepted the gospel, right? These will be among that general resurrection. It is for the just. Remember that
For the saved.
For the just.
for the just, for those that have accepted Christ.
Yeah.
Remember that when Christ comes, the millennium begins. Remember, there's a millennium, 1,000 years, and then after the 1,000 years, God will begin to, or God in Christ, of course, raises up the dead, and though this is the second resurrection. This resurrection is just for those that are lost
That's after the millennium.
after the millennium. Okay,
When he comes
after-
back with this,
with the New
the
Jerusalem.
millennium's gonna be up there.
Yes,
They're gonna be up there.
yes.
I mean, whoever.
Saved.
We, by God's grace.
Yeah.
We, by God's grace.
No, you know, make us.
I,
Oh,
it is humble, but let us hope for the best, right? Because in hoping, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing. That's where we want to be.
That's where we want to be,
Hasta
and
que
that-
quieres estar ahí, Charlie?
that is the mark. That's where we want to be. We, by being here, we don't secure it. Our lives, the way we live our lives, that's gonna be what secures it. The way we, our devotion to God, our daily living, the decisions that we make on a daily basis, that will make up whether or not we will be there. By God's grace, remember, we read in that vision, the day star vision, at the beginning of the study, the third angel's message, that when Ellen White saw that the friends that were separated by death and those that had died under the first angel's message, they had asked what had they gone through after they had died. The only response that they had was that by God's grace there was nothing that they could recall that was too great for the glory that they were now experiencing in the New Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, when Christ comes, we won't feel like we're worthy of being there. He's going to say, my grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient. And when he says that, you will feel that you have the right to be there. You see? Because of him. It's because of him. Nothing that we can do
It's gonna be because of.
is gonna be worthy. It's what Christ has done in us, right? And it's because we follow him, and we're following him by going through these messages, accepting that which is light, accepting that which is biblical. Okay? And so notice, Satan begins to, as soon as 1894, 50 years later, he begins to divert their attention. He begins to have them fall away from that which was given them in 1848.
Oh, yeah.
See?
Makes sense.
It makes sense,
With
right?
The other things that went on.
Yes, exactly. The first angel's message, by that time, the majority had departed
So
from.
we're just waiting for them to kind of pass away, huh?
Yes.
So they can.
So they could bring in these falsehoods. Now, good thing that Lothbro was alive because he's defending what our pioneers had believed. Okay, and so uh, I believe we read the whole quote. Um, we the last thing we left off was that there will be a partial resurrection. We also call it the special resurrection, and in this resurrection, this is where
The 144,000 are going to resurrect
a,
like that.
a special portion of the 144,000
And the
resurrect.
ones that crucified him.
And that's it. That's
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 the other.
that's the other part, right? Brother Tony is getting ahead of himself
Yeah, but
a little bit.
okay, we'll get that.
We're gonna leave it for later, but that's fine, brother. Uh, don't take it the wrong way. Uh, but we want to be able to, so that way we don't get distracted
Yeah,
of what
yeah.
we're trying to focus on. I was leaving it for a later time, but yes, there will be the those 144,000 that will come up. Those that had died in the faith of the third angel, they will come up at that time. And what is it that causes them to resurrect?
What time is that?
This is during the seven plagues. Uh,
So by that
act-
time, when the seven plagues come, the sealing had already been
yes,
finished.
yes. The sealing is what closes the work. So remember the angel with the inkhorn. He goes forth. This is at the beginning of the sealing. This is 1848, November um, 18th.
Yeah.
This is when that angel goes forward to seal. Right? He's sealing
Yeah.
throughout this time period.
Until-
When until the last person is sealed.
Uh-huh.
Okay, when the last person is sealed, once there's 144,000 in number,
Yeah.
then those winds will let go. Then Michael stands up. Okay,
And
then probation is closed at that time.
Oh.
At that time,
Everything happens at that.
everything begins to happen. Plagues begin to fall. Now, specifically, we'll still need to study it. We'll still need to study, but it's gonna be during the seventh plague
Yeah.
when God's voice
That's right.
utters the day and time. Remember the loud cry?
Yeah.
No man maketh known the day and hour. Well, under the seventh plague, it is that voice that gives us the day and time that also causes this special resurrection.
So they're gonna be here through that through the seven plagues.
At the very end of the seven plagues.
What the very
At the
end is-
very end, because this
not the beginning.
not at the beginning. But remember, there's one thing to keep in mind. The plagues are cumulative. Does that make sense? That means the first plague begins and doesn't go away. It continues, and then the second plague begins,
And that other
and
one's
it
still
doesn't
going
go
on,
away.
they're
And
both-
they're going simultaneously,
Wow.
one after the other. And so when they come up, they see the very end of all of the plagues
Oh.
at the same time.
They don't go through.
Uh-huh.
They don't go through the plagues. It's,
Well, in a
in a
sense, yes.
that's
In a
Part
sense,
of it.
yes, because they don't go away.
yeah.
We
there's
would
only-
we
oh,
could
yeah, there's
we
still-
we can say that they have gone through all of the plagues because
they're all at the same time.
they are all at the same time,
at the very end.
at the very end. They come up at the worst time of history. Okay? And so if we're sealed, we will be a part of that. We will be able to see exactly what they saw or what they're going to see at the very worst time of Earth's history.
So everyone who gets sealed, basically gonna die before the coming of the Lord, or is there gonna be few that are what? Because you said the last, so the last one is sealed.
Till the last one is sealed.
So say that last one is, that got sealed.
He could be alive.
Still be alive when
He
that
could be
happens. That's
alive.
the ones that are gonna get transferred.
He can still live all the way until Christ comes because he was the last one to be sealed. That doesn't mean that he will stay alive. I mean, but one thing to also remember is that martyrdom is not a part of the experience of the 144,000. And we know this because when Ellen White saw, when she saw in vision, this is the Daystar vision, she saw that there were uh, three groups of redeemed. Three. It was the great multitude, and this is what the Bible states, and also the 144,000 of which she would form a part of that number.
Well, because there's even if you're not 100 in the number, there's still a group that's with them, huh? With the
Well, let's make the distinctions clear. Okay, first the general, the great multitude. This multitude cannot be numbered, right? According to the Bible, it cannot be numbered.
Okay.
But the 144,000, they are numbered. They have a number. It can be numbered. It's small enough to be numbered.
And they are the special.
Okay, but in that vision, she saw another group. This group had a red border in their garment. Remember that?
Yes, that's the one that died.
These are the martyrs.
Martyrs, yeah.
The martyrs are a separate group. They have the border around their garment. They are not part of the 144,000. They were not with them. Remember? She saw them being a separate group.
separate
Right?
group.
A separate group, not being with them. Because when she saw it, she noticed the border around the garment.
And there were kids too.
What means the border of the garden?
That red border means that they're martyrs.
Yeah, and they
That
were,
they died for Jesus.
and there were kids too, as well as
They
adults.
died for
Correct.
Not
Correct.
kids.
That is correct. And so, among them, none of them had that red border. Otherwise, she would have known who they were. See? So that makes it very clear that the experience of the 144,000 is that they do not die by martyrdom.
Uh-huh.
There's a
Okay.
special group.
Just accept and believe, and they are following.
They follow the Lamb whithersoever he goes. And so that means that the light that God is sending under the first, second, and third angel, and then the loud cry of the third angel, this the pioneers didn't have. They didn't have that last message. That message is being given
Yeah,
to
they
us.
don't.
But the first, second, and third angel, they had the privilege of being able to follow Christ, and the way they follow him is through the light that God gives them.
Uh-huh.
See, this is why we're going through their messages.
That means this is the distinction.
This is the distinction, that those that follow Christ
Uh-huh.
have all the light that God has been giving. See,
By the message.
by the message. Not all of them will have that light, because as soon as 1894, Satan began to bring in the confusion, the darkness. Okay, there was a time when the third angel, according to what we've been studying, the first, second, third angel, there was a time when those messages were forgotten. This is why we're restudying. This is why we're going back to look at what they believe. Because what they believed, according to their very words and Ellen White's word, was the truth.
Back to that ancient path.
Exactly.
And
And
now we're in present truth.
now we're in the present truth. And that becomes the present truth again. This that we're studying right now is the present truth.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, so far we're on the same page.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll go forward.
Was Sister White? Was she among the?
Yes,
Was
she
she
was
one of?
the
Was
50,000.
she sealed?
She was promised to be a
To be
part of
one of the
one of the
144,000?
144,000, as long as she was faithful.
Yeah.
Because the angel told her, "You will have the privilege of, and you and the 144,000, and to be among them is to be of them.
Of them.
You
The
can't,
angel
you
told
can't
That's
be
where there's that confusion.
Yeah.
That confusion that there was another.
just because it says you're among them.
that there's another little group among them.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah,
It's really
it's
that-
the same. It's the
Means you're
same.
one of them.
Yes. Yes. To if anybody else comes, let's say Don Virginio comes in right now, he is among us. He's of our number
Yeah.
because he is among us.
Yeah.
He can't be a separate group outside,
It's kind of
that
weird.
doesn't make any
Doesn't
sense.
make any sense. And
No,
he's here, but he's one of the. He's not one of the seven that were here.
correct. Yeah.
But he's with us.
This is weird, no?
Can't even explain it.
And so that's confusion.
Uh-huh.
To be among a group, you are a part of that
Here
group.
you become a number of it.
You become a number of that group.
Like if we're seven here, it becomes and he's the eighth one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's
He's
among
among us. And so those minor details, people have caused controversy over those things. To be among.
He's
To
not
be
a part
with.
of this group because he's not a
Oh, he's
believer.
not. No. He's not with us.
Uh-huh. He's
Now,
not with us.
Now, okay, that's a whole separate
Yeah. But if we're in the
idea.
group, but if we're sitting here,
Yeah.
he is among the.
That's a whole.
That's here right
That's
now.
let me clarify what Rocio just mentioned. Okay, so to be a believer, well, I don't know if everybody believes.
Even us, I mean.
Right.
Ajá.
even-
Hasta
Sí.
nosotros
Mm.
no podemos ser fieles creyentes.
We don't know who
everybody
that's
in their
something
own-
only God
you
can
got
see.
it in your own heart,
Ajá.
See? And so we can't be judges of what people believe and what they don't believe.
Oh, I
See?
see.
But in general,
But most of the time, you know.
To
by the
be a
book,
part
you
of-
know,
to-
know
to be a part
by the
of
well, you know,
Well,
the no,
to be a
judge
part
by
of
the
a,
cover.
Right.
the main thing is this.
Okay.
To be a part of this group, you have to be here. Tienes que estar aquí para ser parte de este grupo,
Sí, sí, sí.
right?
No importa que todavía tu fe no es suficiente.
Eso
Fíjate
solamente
que
Dios lo ve.
no,
Eso-
es lo
Pero ya
único,
estás
¿eh?
parte del grupo que
Yeah.
está.
Yes.
Yeah. But la
Okay.
palabra aquí, among, entre.
Porque todos estamos aquí, ajá, pero como dices tú, solo Dios sabe nuestro corazón.
Eso solamente Dios lo sabe, ¿verdad? Y
Yeah.
nosotros no podemos juzgar, a ver, creo que Tomás no está con nosotros. Creo que él no. Eso yo estoy juzgando. Yo estoy juzgando lo que él está pensando, eso no podemos. Ok, pero para decir que, para estar entre este grupo, tienes que estar presente.
Okay.
Si no estás aquí, no lo podemos contar, ¿verdad? Ahorita somos cuántos,
Seven.
Siete. ok. Y luego si viene Don Virginio, ya somos 8, ¿verdad? Está entre el grupo. Y al estar entre el grupo, el número incrementa, ¿verdad? Ya no somos 7, sino somos 8.
Pero ahorita no. No se
Ahorita,
puede contar.
exactamente, porque no está aquí presente. Y de esa manera es como se hace el sello. El sello tienes que estar entre el grupo para que
Ya.
seas parte del
I
grupo.
wonder what for though. Se habla de por qué, para qué se hizo ese número.
Well, there's 12 disciples, and 12 times 12 is 144. So, but it'd be 120 times 120.
What I'm understanding by God giving us a number, a group
Yeah.
that are numbered, is that is a prophecy of how many would be involved in giving this message,
Oh, okay.
Oh.
in giving and making and
That's
giving
so part of the 144 is the people that get stuck with the
with the
pioneers probably too.
well, we already know that there's a partial resurrection and they're going to be a part of it. And because of that, they have the benefit or the privilege of being resurrected under this message. Let's go look at this is going to be a side note.
Imagínense que estén todas las plagas y todo y que de repente veamos a la hermana White.
Let's take a look here.
Los va a poder ver uno, ¿verdad?
Yeah. Oh.
Y,
Yo pienso.
Pues depende pues cómo andemos, si estamos allá en una cueva allá por allá metidos en...
y yo mi pregunta es, ¿cuáles son los 144,000? ¿Cuáles son los que están contados?
Bueno, en español lo vamos a también estudiar.
Ya
No te,
luego.
ya, ahorita
Ahorita no.
ahorita Tienes el privilegio de escucharlo en inglés. Ya.
Dos veces.
Mhm.
Nos vamos a agarrar dos veces.
Hey. Okay, so Revelation chapter 14. Remember, we looked at the initial verses of this chapter, which give us uh, it lets us it lets us know that John saw the Lamb that stood on Mount Zion, and with him this special group, 144,000. Okay, having his Father's name, and this is the seal of the God of the living God, and the Father's name are written in their forehead. Okay, so now notice verse 13. We're talking about the third angel's message, correct? First, second, and third. We're reading from the third, but all messages combined make up that message. You can't have the first without the second, and you can't have the third without the first and second. They must be combined. They must be all. They're a package. You know, you can't have one without the other. In the third angel, the angel says this, and I heard, verse 13, and I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, write, blessed are the what?
The dead.
The dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. From this point forward, from 1844 forward, there's a special blessing upon those that die. Okay? It says, yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. And what is their works? Their writings.
Talking about the pioneers.
It's talking about the pioneers and what they wrote. And because of what they wrote, their works do follow them.
Yeah.
We have access to those writings now, and now we can continue the sealing. Now God is beginning to seal again. Okay?
And one purpose of that is that he wants you to give the message to everyone, and you need everyone, anyone and everyone.
The only way that the world could come to an end and Christ can come is if there's 144,000 sealed. And the only way to be sealed is to know this message
And give it.
and give it. Yes. That's the only way. Okay?
And live in the Lord. Everything that it says that they were.
And totally surrender.
Mm-hmm. But the blessing is for who? For the dead that die henceforth. From 1844 and onward, from that time and onward, those that were giving this message were to have this blessing upon them.
That's
And
not saying. Is that talking about? That's not talking about the 144,000. No, that's talking about.
it is. It is. It is, because at the very beginning, again, this is why I began with the first verse. And I looked, and lo, and he stands on that mountain, and he flattens it.
Yeah.
Right?
How big you have, how powerful one.
Okay.
Big
But if you also remember, we looked at the day star vision, and what John saw here, Ellen White continues to give us details of that event. Does that make sense? He gives us details of that event. I don't know why it's doing this, but let me go back. Little-
Ahí es donde, that's where some people teach that 144,000 is que no es un, it's not a number, it's not a literal number. That everyone that's saved is being represented by the 144,000. Que son los 144,000. That's what they teach.
In further studies, what we need to analyze is the way God numbers. Okay? When God numbered God's people, the people of Israel, how did
including,
he included the families?
yeah.
So it wasn't just
But still,
individuals.
yeah.
He counted who? the males.
The males and their.
And that also, by numbering them,
It came with the wife and the kids.
yes, they were those that were not specifically numbered, but they made up part of that number. And
Yeah.
so the way we would understand it today then is that they are 144,000 families.
Yeah, but the way they teach it like they don't separate the groups. They don't separate the groups.
They don't separate
Like
the great multitude from the 144,000.
Some of the greatest, I'm gonna say the biggest preachers that I've heard.
Right.
And
Because
that
they
say
believe it
that
to be a
Seventh-day Adventist.
they believe it to be symbolic.
Symbolic,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Oh.
Yeah.
that there's 144,000 represents everybody that's saved.
Hmm.
That's what it is.
Everybody.
Everybody who's saved.
Hmm.
But it's more.
But that's error.
Yeah,
It's
it's error.
Doug Batchelor teaches that.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
error.
But that's error. We know this because according to the history of how it was given, right? How this sealing message began, we noticed that it began in 1848. And if you take on the position that it's everybody throughout time, and that
Then it should have
and,
begun.
and there's no distinction between the the great multitude, the one that can't be numbered, but yet this group right here, the 144,000, are numbered,
Yeah.
and it actually tells us how God numbers them.
Then it couldn't have started right there.
It couldn't have started when they believe,
No.
since Adam. They
Yeah,
believe
had-
it's
had it started.
people throughout all time.
Yeah.
And we heard in Brother Andrew's group today that there was a person that has that view, that we have two great multitudes. And she believes in two groups, but they're both innumerable. They both cannot be numbered. And yet that's confusion because we have one group that can't be numbered already. And so the next group, which is the 144,000 that are numbered, this one can be numbered. It doesn't make sense for God to have two innumerable numbers. Or
So that's if you number like the household, like como que dice, not numbering the rest of the
their families.
family.
That's the best way we could put it.
family.
And so that means that if you're a child that and your parent is part of that number, then you have the benefit of being that number as well. See? And so
Not
144,
automatically though. You still have to work your own salvation, huh?
everybody will have to make their own decision. Yes. That means that you will
Just
be
because
you have been taught the message.
because your dad's the preacher doesn't mean.
Oh no, you also have to believe the message. You have to believe it. But because of that, they have that privilege.
Yeah, the privilege of being that group.
Yes. On top of that, I had another thought that Brother Andrew brought out today was that all the qualifications. What was it? Hopefully it comes back to me. Because we have there's two groups, the 144,000 and the great multitude, innumerable multitude. Part of it I just mentioned is that the 144,000, they begin to be sealed, and so we saw the history of when they were sealed. On top of that, there are other qualifications, and they're just not coming back to me right now. We'll run into them as we go, okay? So that way we're not wasting any time. But everything that we talked about so far is in reference to this, and so that's good. Our minds need to be working. Our minds need to be able to understand this. Okay. There will be a special resurrection, and those that are part of that special resurrection are those that have died in this message, in the third angel's message, giving the third angel's message. Their writings go forth, even though they're dead, they continue to speak through them. Okay.
Yeah.
Surely those who awake to everlasting life will be alive among men, right? in that special resurrection, they're coming back to life before Jesus comes, and there will be alive among men. This is how that fulfills that part of the prophecy,
Oh man,
that they will be redeemed
when
among
people are still alive.
when people are still alive.
Okay.
I
They
think
are
that is to avoid
they are
the
redeemed
witnesses
among the living.
Among the living, so it can't be after everybody's dead. Or
Right.
after everybody, it can't be.
They must be alive among the living in order for them to be a part of this group. Okay? And this is how it fulfills the special or partial resurrection. Oh, I need to make it big.
And the only way for them to be alive is to get resurrected.
And be resurrection. Yeah. They have to be resurrected. Okay, if in 1848 through 1850 persons were being sealed, we would naturally expect they would be of those wakened to everlasting life, and so be with the 144,000. And if you're with them, you are of them. Of this resurrection, we read in early writings, Spiritual Gifts, Old Edition, page 145, the Old Edition. There was a one clear place of settled glory, whence came whose voice? The voice of God, like many waters, shaking the heavens and the earth. There was a mighty earthquake. Okay, so in that voice, it shakes the heavens and the earth, and this is what causes that great earthquake. It says the graves were open, and those who had died in faith under the third angel's message, just like we read, keeping the Sabbath, came forth from their dusty beds, glorified, to hear the covenant of peace that God was to make with those who had kept his law. Okay, and so here's the qualifications. Those that died under the third angel's message, and we've been studying it, right? First, second, and third. We're still studying the third. We ran into this message, the third angel's message, and when we say the sealing message, it is part of the third angel, and therefore it is the third angel's message. It is one and the same. Keeping what? The Sabbath. They came forth from their dusty beds, glorified, to hear the covenant of peace that God was to make with those who had kept his law. And so not only the Sabbath, but the whole law.
Yes, the Ten Commandments.
James says if you keep part of the Ten Commandments, but yet offend in one, then we are offenders of all. We break the whole law. And therefore, that means that they do not have false ideas of God, right? They have one true God. They don't believe in this Trinity, right? These actually believe in the one true God. And therefore, they're able to come up in this special resurrection, and they hear the voice of God, and God makes a covenant with them, a covenant of peace. And not only that, but the part that's left out of this quote is that they also hear the day and hour of God's, or the Son of God's coming. The day and hour.
The 144,000?
Yes.
And also they have a special song that they know only them.
Yes, and we'll get into that later. Notice this quote. Okay, during this time, there was a sister by the name of Elvira Hastings. Okay, she died in 1850. Okay, she died in 1850. How long? How many years had passed since 1848? 2 years had passed.
Yeah.
I saw that she, Elvira Hastings, was sealed and would come up at the voice of God. Remember we just read that? She would come up at the voice of God and stand upon the earth and would be with the 144,000. So by saying that she would be with, she's part of that number. She's part of the 144,000. I saw we need not mourn for her. She would rest in the time of trouble. So let's not get confused here. I put a star there for a reason. Okay, and there's the star up there, and we're gonna get it. We're gonna get see a closer. We're gonna get a closer view of that. Okay. What we're gonna see two things about this quote. First, Elvira Hastings, and this time of trouble down here. Okay. She would rest in the time of trouble. Is it the same time of trouble that's mentioned up here?
I don't think so.
It can't be. Because she's standing upon the earth during the time of trouble. When they come up out of the graves,
Ajá.
when they come up in that special resurrection, they're coming up in the time of trouble. This is when the angels had already let loose. This is when there's war. There's the seven last plagues have accumulated all the way up until the seventh. This is when they come up. They come up at the worst time of Earth's history. Okay, so she wakes up at that time, but yet down here it says she would rest in the time of trouble. It can't be one and the same. See,
No.
and so we're gonna figure out what time of trouble that is, that she would rest. It's now. It's actually this time that we're living. Okay, just so that you have an idea. She's asleep right now, right?
Yeah.
Is she resting right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we know that it has to be during a time other than this time, which is the seven last plagues, the close of probation, because that's when she wakes up. So there's two times of trouble, and we're gonna get into that right now.
Ah, yes, yes.
hmm There's one before Michael stands up, and there's one after Michael stands up. Okay. We call the one going on now the little time of trouble. It's a small time of trouble, because the one that's coming is the great time of Jacob's trouble. Okay, this is great. There has never been one like it, right? Since the earth has been there, that time is coming. That's the time that we're preparing for, and we need to be sealed if we want to be part of the 144,000. Okay, what we are not saying is that exclusively 144,000 will only be saved. That is not what this message is saying. Okay? Those that consecrate their lives to the Lord to be a part of this number will be of that number if they fit the description, if they're able to come to that consecration, right? By God's grace, we shall be a part of that number, and we need to strive, Ellen White says, to be a part of that number. In doing that, we can have the assurance that God will be merciful, and that we can be still saved. Okay, it's not, oh, you got to be or else you're lost. At some point I had that thought, but now I don't believe. I do believe that God will be.
We gotta, like, that's
We
gonna be our-
that's the mark.
The mark.
We definitely want to be that. There's gonna be a lot of privileges for them, and hopefully we see that and we consecrate our lives in that direction. In doing so, God will be merciful, even if we're not. We can still be a part of that great multitude.
Yeah.
There is a possibility. I believe, at least after looking at some of the things that Willie White says, I'm considering that. Okay, it's God is loving, God is merciful, and so there is possibilities. Okay, now this is our focus though. We want to be, and so in order for us to be a part of that, we need to understand this. We need to know that yes, there is a special resurrection. There will be those that will come up in that special resurrection according to Daniel 12, and will also form part of the 144,000. There's a special blessing placed upon them. Okay? So I'll continue to read the quote. So we need to understand that there is two time of trouble. We need to understand when that time of trouble, the little time of trouble, when did it begin? she would be with the 144,000. Back to the quote. I saw. We need not mourn for her. She would rest in the time of trouble, and all that we could do, and all that we could mourn for her,
For was our loss.
right? And all that we could mourn for her was our loss and being deprived of her company. And so instead of mourning for her death, is actually
Just because you're not with
she's
them
not
anymore,
with-
you're not, used to being.
she's not there with her. And so she must have been a blessing to be around with, right? And that's what we need to be to others as well. We need to be a blessing. On top of that, we're also going to look at what she believed, right? Because she was sealed, right? And so what did she believe? I saw her death would result in good. And I believe that we're seeing this right now. Her death helps us understand what this sealing is. Her death helps us understand when it began. Because she was sealed 2 years, or during the process, during the 2 years, she had been sealed. Right? She lets us know she was sealed and would come up at the voice of God and stand upon the earth and would be with, and to be with, we know, is to be of that number, the 144,000. So far, we're on the same page. So here are the 2 points. Number 1, what did Miss Hastings believe? That's the first thing we're going to touch on. Number 2, what is the time of trouble? Not the time when Michael stands up,
The little one.
the little time of trouble. Okay, that's the one that we're referring to right here, and we're going to look at that. And then after that, we will close. Here's a picture of Miss Hastings, Elvira Stewart Hastings.
They have a picture of her?
Yeah.
Wow.
What did Miss Hastings believe? Okay. Here's an unfinished letter written by Sister Elvira Hastings to a brother and sister a few days before she fell asleep in Jesus. Okay. So we read already that Miss White said that she was sealed and that she would come up at the voice of God and stand upon the earth and be with or be of that number, the 144,000. Okay? So if we want to see what the 144,000 look like, here's a picture of one of those. Okay? We're going to now look at what she believed. We're going to read this letter where she explains some things about what she believes. Okay? My dear brother and sister, I sit down and take my pen, relying upon the Lord to guide it, while I pour forth something of the contents of my soul into your bosoms. Neglect my duty to you longer I cannot. Time, precious time is passing, not one moment to lose. Oh, the blessedness of being a co-worker with God in these last days. Oh, I do know that great is the mercy towards them that fear him, and knowing also the terrors of the Lord, I would in meekness and in the fear of God, whom I endeavor to serve, try to persuade you to be reconciled to God and to fear him and give glory to his name. And so this letter is to persuade them, to make them make a decision.
For us.
What I believe is the letter is preserved for us in that
But at that moment,
it
he was ready
extends to us, but more specifically is for a brother and sister that she wrote.
Okay.
Okay? And so we can take the contents and apply it to ourselves, right? Okay. It says John saw Revelation 14, and so where is she guiding their minds? To the first,
Third,
second, and third angel's messages. An angel flying through the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell on the face of the earth, Another angel followed, crying, Babylon is fallen. A third still follows, whose message you will um, please read for yourselves. Here is where we now are, having passed the cry at midnight in the parable of the 10 virgins. And so she's going through, without giving us a lot of detail,
Yep.
her experience. She went through these messages. She believed these messages, okay? And we're going to see more evidence of that here as we continue. She says, Here is where we now are, under the third angel. Having passed the cry at midnight in the parable of the 10 virgins, we have been brought down through these angels, cries to the third message. And here, John exclaims, Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus.
Chicos, por la respiración.
Buenas.
Buenas tardes, buenas tardes.
¿Cómo está? Bien, disculpe que me interrumpa.
Pase, pase, pase.
Bueno. Bien, gracias. ¿Y usted?
Okay, we have been brought down through the angels, cries to the third message. And here John exclaims, Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. But John, what do you mean? Have not Christians in all ages kept the commandments of God? Let Daniel answer. So she's giving us a Bible study at this time. Daniel 7:25. This Pope Gregory did change the time of the Sabbath and the law of God, notwithstanding God has said, My covenant will I not break, nor alter the thing that has gone out of my mouth. Okay, and so God does not break what he says. If he says it's the seventh day, it is the seventh day, right? And so she gives us these two verses, Daniel 7:25, and also it would be good to know what verse she used there. I don't know if she didn't give us the where she got it from, but we can find it easily. It says, The angel from the east, having the seal of the living God, and the man clothed in linen, spoke of in Ezekiel having a writer's inkhorn by his side. So now she's in the sealing message. Those things that she saw in 1848. She is now going through giving us the same message, are one and the same thing. That is, the angel having the seal of the living God in Revelation 7, and Ezekiel chapter 9, the man with the writer's inkhorn are one and the same thing. They have already gone forth. She's saying that when did it begin? In her time. In her time. It had already gone forth to set the mark or seal upon all them that sigh and cry for the abominations done in the land. Please read this whole vision. Ezekiel 9, 1 through 11. See the slaughtering men right behind, whose eyes are not to spare men, women, nor children. Here is just where we are in time's history. The work is fast closing up. And here I would remark that Sister Ellen White saw in vision last June 5 angels with rolls in their hands. She asked her accompanying angel what they meant. He told her she would know hereafter. And in September, she saw them with their rolls open, and they were writing names, while at the same time they were anxiously looking down, watching the words and actions of those who were candidates for the seal. And so what was written in those rolls? The names, those that were to be candidates for the sealing of the 144,000.
Oh, they were already chosen.
And they were written in those rolls. Our object is to revive these sweet testimonies that were written in the pure, cheering, and soul stirring spirit that attended the Advent movement from its commencement. And when did it commence? In the 1840s through the Great Advent movement, the first and second angel's message. That's the commencement. Hoping that many will be led to see the what? Old paths. Those are the old paths, the first, second angel's message. Clearly, and once more stand on, was it saying red? The original message. Do you remember what the original message is? If it is the first angel. But more specifically, it's okay if you don't remember. We could.
To leave.
It's the third, all three, no, everything.
All three are involved. You're correct. Here's a small hint. I have it here with me. Oh well, brother Tomas can't see, but for the rest of us, I have it here with me.
Chart.
The chart. That's the original faith, and we're gonna see it.
It's all right there.
Yes, the Lord with the powerful hand brought the Advent people out from bondage and corruption of the nominal churches, just like God brought His people out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Here, He brought them out of the bondage of the corruption of the nominal churches. Remember the second angel? Come out of her, my people. And they were free. But alas, how many of those free, honest, precious souls have been allured back into what is called the Advent Church? This is 1850. She's writing about what was taking place in her time. A lot of them fell back into those
50,000.
nominal churches.
Yeah.
See? This is what Satan was doing during the sealing time. He was diverting them back to go back into Babylon. The original faith. It was the united testimony of the second Advent lecturers and papers. So not only those that preached it, but those that were writing as well. When standing on the original faith. What is the original faith? That the publication of the chart, the 1843 chart, was a fulfillment of Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 2 and 3. If that chart was a subject of prophecy, and notice the parentheses, and those who deny it leave the original faith. Okay, and so those people that were going back to the nominal churches, what were they getting off of? Of this. This right here, the chart. Of this chart. They were denying the original faith. Then it follows that BC 457 was the year from which to date the 2,300 days. And we'll go ahead and stop there. Because now it's going to go back into the tarrying time. We already studied this in connection with the the midnight cry. Now, let's go forward. Notice how she ends her letter here. Oh, that all the true children had stood fast in the liberty wherewith Christ set them free in 1843 and 1844. It's leading us back to the first and second angel's message. And not been entangled in this cruel yoke of bondage. And by that time, she had also studied the sealing angel, and therefore she understood what the third angel was. She understood the commandments of God. She also understood that the Sabbath had been changed, and therefore she understood the mark of the beast. Okay? Crisis. This was enough for her to be sealed. Okay? And on top of that, her dying left a void in their group. Which means that she had a sweet presence with her. She had something special in her presence.
Some of her writings, if she wrote.
I tried looking for one that I thought was hers, but it wasn't. It was Sarah Brown. We'll read it later. And so, but just to see what some of those old periodicals under the first and second angel's message, what they were understanding, and Miller's is something that
They're
we
all
should
on
have.
the same page, huh? They're all on the
Uh-huh.
same message.
Yeah,
To be
they were all on the same page. They were all united, and Alan White lets us know that they were perfectly united under those messages. But under the third, this is where Satan came to distract and cause many of them to go back into their former churches.
Está prendido la.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we're almost done. We've looked at what she believed. So she believed the first, second, and third angel's message. She believed the sealing. She believed everything that the Millerites had preached, all the way to the midnight cry. And so she was on the path. She was on that path that Ellen White saw. With the midnight cry shining behind, all the way till to the New Jerusalem. But now the question is, what is this time of trouble, or little time of trouble? Okay, we're gonna see that, and we need to review the quote now. I saw that she, Elvira Hastings, was sealed and would, number one, come up at the voice of God and stand upon the earth. And this we know is during the great time of Jacob's trouble. This is the great time of Jacob's trouble. At this time is when the trouble has been all over the world. Okay?
The 7 plagues.
All over the world. The angels let go, and now Armageddon has begun. Probation is closed. Okay? This is when she comes up. Alright? Let's keep reading. And would be with the 144,000. I saw we need not mourn for her. She would, number two, rest in the time of trouble. Okay? This is the distinction from number one. Okay? Because she's resting. And number one, she's awake. She's waking up. Okay? So we need to be able to distinguish the two. And all that we could mourn for her loss was being deprived of her company. I saw her death would result in good. The time of trouble has commenced. It is begun. And this was quoted by Ellen White. Ellen White said these words in 1848, and Joseph Bates wrote them down. Okay? He was the one that was present at this meeting, and he wrote down these very words. The time of trouble has commenced. It is begun. Okay? Now, the rest will be able to distinguish between the one that will come when the angels let go, and then the one that she's speaking of here. Okay? We need to be able to distinguish what's going on during this time of trouble. It says this statement made in November 1848 at first sight appears to contradict Ellen White's vision some weeks later in January 1849. We're going to see that quote as well, where she saw that Michael had not stood up, and that the time of trouble, such as never was, had not yet commenced. Okay, so the November vision and the January vision are distinct and different. Okay, they're two different times of trouble. We need to be able to distinguish this. She said in November 1848, the time of trouble has commenced, it is begun. Notice what it continues to say. But further examination of two passages makes clear that the time of trouble referred to in November is not the same as referred to in January. The January vision uses the expression time of trouble in the context of what? Daniel chapter 12 verse 1. And at that time, Daniel said, shall Michael stand up. And actually it's Gabriel, the angel. At that time shall Michael stand up, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was. So another way to express it is the great time of trouble, or Jacob's trouble.
Great tribulation.
This verse was understood as indicating that a time of trouble would occur immediately after the close of Christ's intercession. When Christ ends his administration in the heavenly temple as high priest, when that happens, then the time of trouble begins. This is the reason why it says in Daniel
When he
that
stands up.
he would stand up. Okay, when he stands up, he's taking off his priestly garbs, and he puts on his what? His kingly garb. Okay, he's coming as King of Kings. All right. In the November vision, however, the time of trouble has already started. Right? In the November vision, the time of trouble has already started, but the standing up of Michael is still future. That time has not yet come. This is her words. But will come when Michael stands up. Clearly, a time of trouble that commences, number one, before Michael stands up cannot refer to the time of trouble found in Daniel 12:1, which commences, number two, after Michael stands up. And so there's a time of trouble before Michael stands up, and there's a time of trouble after Michael stands up. Make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Very clear. Here's the 1849 quote. I saw that God had children who do not see and keep the Sabbath. So one thing we need to understand, there's people that have not understood the Sabbath, correct?
Yes.
There was in her time, and there are today. There are people that do not know anything about it. It says they have not rejected light upon it. And so the distinction here is that they cannot reject.
Because they don't know.
Right? They cannot reject it because they don't know it. But once you know it, then the light has come. By rejecting it, you're rejecting what? Salvation. You're rejecting the opportunity of being saved. Okay? And it says, at the commencement of the time of trouble. So notice, this is either after Michael stands up or before. And so she's going to let us know. Okay? At the commencement of the time of trouble, we were filled with the Holy Ghost as we went forth and proclaimed the Sabbath more fully. Number one, this cannot be when Michael stands up. Why? Because according to the quote, it says, we were filled with the Holy Ghost and we went forth to proclaim the Sabbath more fully. By the time Michael stands up, there is no more probation. That's it. Probation has closed. There will not be a necessity to go out and proclaim any message because probation has closed. There's too late.
It's too late to enter.
That's it.
The doors are closed.
Right? And so this cannot, according to the quote, they went forth to proclaim the Sabbath more fully. That means the probation is still going on. Okay? But apart from that, notice what she says. She's explaining what she's referring to. She says, the commencement of that time of trouble, here in the quote, here mentioned does not refer to the time when the plague shall begin to be poured out, but to a short period just before they are poured out, while Christ is in the sanctuary. Okay? This is the time of trouble that she's referring to. And we know when it began. November 1848. That's when this time of trouble begins. And therefore, we are still in that time of trouble. And what is the purpose of the time of trouble? Notice what it continues to say.
Oh,
It's the time of trouble.
it's trouble for the Adventist. Really?
Wow.
Or for everybody?
Well, notice let's read what the quote says, okay?
Uh-huh.
It says, it's is the time of trouble, the one that we just referred to, the little time of trouble, just so that we're specific. It says it's the time of trouble on the increase. So it is to what?
Yep.
Increase.
Increase.
and will increase more and more. The trouble will never end until the earth is rid of who? The wicked. The purpose of this time of trouble is to get rid of the wicked. If we look at what has been taking place throughout the time since 1848, what has there been? Wars, rumors of wars. In those wars, have there been deaths?
Lots.
Lots of deaths, right? All the way until just recently, Hamas, right?
Yeah.
What has been taking place over there in Palestine?
Right.
People dying every day.
Yes. And
People
starving.
dying every day. Now, it's not up to us to say, oh, that person was wicked, right? If we go back to 2001, September 11th, how many people died there?
Right.
About 3,000 or so, right?
Yeah.
Oh, 2000?
It is not up to us to say, oh, a lot of them were wicked. We don't know that. But according to this quote, the great disasters that have been taking place since 1848 of November, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. And it says that it's going to increase more and more. That trouble is going to increase until the earth is rid of the wicked. When is the earth rid of the wicked? During the 7 last plagues. When Michael stands up, when there is no more time for probation, right there, if you did not receive the message, you will be part of that wicked.
Wow.
Yeah, because you will not be protected. at
You
that
will
time,
ha-
the way
you-
Psalms 91 says.
Exactly.
You will not.
Yes.
You won't receive the protection.
You
That's the
won't
only ones that
receive.
are gonna make it, 'cause
And
they're gonna be
when
protected.
did God begin to cover His people? 1848, November 18th. That's when God began to cover and seal them, right? And that sealing is a protection for that time when Michael stands up, right? And so that in the little time of trouble, we are to expect what? Wars, destruction, floods,
all the way to the 7th.
chaos,
And that's happening.
and it's happening more and more. From September 11th down to this very time, that's what we have been seeing over and over and over. If you turn on the news, you're definitely gonna see this more and more and more.
It increases,
And so these words that were written in 1848 are a fulfillment of what's taking place now. And it's going to be on the increase all the way until Michael stands up. And then by that time, the plagues will do what cannot be done now. Finish off with the wicked race. And the only ones to be alive when Christ comes will be the 144,000. They will be the only ones living. Okay? And if we're not a part of that number, by God's grace, we hope to be a part of the great multitude. We can say that. You know, but our aim, again, is to be a part of this number. We, here, studying this, we need to be a part of that number by God's grace. You know, we not in our own strength.
Accepting the message,
Accepting the
accepting
messages and
and,
and putting our efforts, our mental efforts to understand them.
to understand.
To understand them. And by understanding, we also can go and share it with others.
So,
Yeah. For now, I believe this is all. We're going to end there. And then we'll pick up on knowing more. We're going to study more. Whether it's literal. I think we've touched on it a little bit here. On more components of the sealing message. That will not be next Sabbath, but the following Sabbath after that. And so let's continue to pray that God continue to give us light, give us understanding on this, and that we would be a part of that number. We want to be a part of that number. Definitely, it will be a great blessing to see and experience the things that they'll be able to experience. We'll see more quotes on that as we continue. Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to find
Shall we
people
pray?
though that are giving this message, though. Say the truth.
And that's why it's gonna be a distinct small amount
It
of
is,
people,
'cause
I believe.
I mean, I know people that are giving, so I'm pretty close, the Father and the Son, you know, but not this whole,
Can we pray?
whole message.
Yeah.
Yes,
Amen.
It's pretty,
yes, brother.
Okay, hold on. Let me just stop the. Let me just end the meeting here.
That's what I was saying.
Where'd it go?
And then your sister's gonna call up and say, hey, you're still on the,
Oh, I forgot to record it.
you did?
Yeah.
it's not being recorded.
At least my face, cause I'm. It's okay. It's okay.
You-
It's gonna be all slides on this one.
But you did,
It's
you
okay.
did vocally
I
you did record it, right?
No, well, the thing is that I'm trying to record both the